Every cursed bloodline breaks tonight. This is whispering narratives where survival isn't promised and the last howl always finds you. The curse rose when the moon split the sky. Every bloodline bends to this circle. 10 bodies break for one moon, and the war began with the first snap of bone. The road ended long before Marla expected it to. A crooked sign swallowed by pine needles and weather warned of private land. But the paint had peeled so badly it was more scar than message. She cut the headlights and let the night press against the windshield. Her childhood home lay somewhere beyond those trees. Forgotten like a grave without a name, the pines breathed. That was her first thought as she stepped out. Gravel crunching beneath her boots. The forest did not sway with wind. It exhaled. Each needle whispered like 1,000 hushed voices, murmuring secrets only the night could translate. She froze, hand brushing the trunk of her car, and felt it, not wind, not breath, but something deeper, a pulse. The house was waiting. It sagged in the clearing like a body that had long since lost the will to stand. Porch planks bowed inward. Windows stared back as hollow sockets when she was a child. Her mother would draw the curtains tight and warn her not to listen to the voices in the grove. The widow waits for blood, she used to say, eyes glassy, lips trembling with the weight of a story too heavy to tell. Now those whispers returned in full chorus. Inside, dust had laid its claim. Every corner was choked in cobwebs, every surface filmed with time. But the pine smell overpowered all of it, wet, resinous, sharp enough to sting her nose. She followed it like a rope pulling her deeper, past the hall where the family portraits had been, past the door that led to her childhood room. Something had scratched the walls at first. She thought it was water damage. Grooves running vertical, deep enough to splinter the plaster. But no water ran with such intent. These were claw marks, raked from ceiling to floor, and they were fresh. Her phone light caught something wet glistening at the edges of the grooves. Sap, but not sap. It shimmered darker, almost red, almost alive. She reached toward it, and the whispers surged. A chorus through the walls. The floorboards, the marrow in her bones. Marked. She stumbled back. The word wasn't in English, wasn't even spoken in a tongue she knew, but she understood it. The way a body understands fear before a mind can catch up. The widow had seen her. A slam echoed through the house, distant from the back door, or maybe from the grove itself. Marla's breath fogged in the cold. She tightened her grip on the phone, as though the dim rectangle of light could hold back the night. But already the forest pressed against the glass, shadows long and skeletal, claws ready to slip between the cracks. Her skin prickled. Something inside her chest thudded, not her heart, not yet, but something older, something buried in her bloodline. A sound rose in her throat, low and guttural, like a growl she had no right to make. She staggered to the front door, her hand shook on the knob, though she hadn't decided whether she wanted to leave or lock it. Either choice felt like an invitation. The forest didn't wait. A howl cracked through the pines, so close it rattled the window panes. It wasn't wolf, it wasn't man, it was the in-between. Marla's blood turned to fire, her body locked, frozen between fight and flight. Somewhere in the whispering chaos, she understood there was no leaving. There was no running. She was already part of the pact. The widow had marked her. The first howl has marked you. Subscribe now or face the night alone. The road ended long before Marla expected it to. A crooked sign swallowed by pine needles and weather warned of private land. But the paint had peeled so badly it was more scar than message. She cut the headlights and let the night press against the windshield. Her childhood home lay somewhere beyond those trees. Forgotten like a grave without a name, the pines breathed. That was her first thought as she stepped out. Gravel crunching beneath her boots. The forest did not sway with wind. It exhaled. Each needle whispered like 1,000 hushed voices, murmuring secrets only the night could translate. She froze, hand brushing the trunk of her car, and felt it, not wind, not breath, but something deeper, a pulse. The house was waiting. It sagged in the clearing like a body that had long since lost the will to stand. Porch planks bowed inward. Windows stared back as hollow sockets when she was a child. Her mother would draw the curtains tight and warn her not to listen to the voices in the grove. The widow waits for blood, she used to say, eyes glassy, lips trembling with the weight of a story too heavy to tell. Now those whispers returned in full chorus. Inside, dust had laid its claim. Every corner was choked in cobwebs, every surface filmed with time. But the pine smell overpowered all of it, wet, resinous, sharp enough to sting her nose. She followed it like a rope, pulling her deeper, past the hall where the family portraits had been, past the door that led to her childhood room. Something had scratched the walls at first. She thought it was water damage. Grooves running vertical, deep enough to splinter the plaster. But no water ran with such intent. These were claw marks, raked from ceiling to floor, and they were fresh. Her phone light caught something wet glistening at the edges of the grooves. Sap, but not sap. It shimmered darker, almost red, almost alive. She reached toward it, and the whispers surged, a chorus through the walls. The floorboards, the marrow in her bones. Marked. She stumbled back. The word wasn't in English, wasn't even spoken in a tongue she knew, but she understood it. The way a body understands fear before a mind can catch up. The widow had seen her. A slam echoed through the house, distant from the back door, or maybe from the grove itself. Marla's breath fogged in the cold. She tightened her grip on the phone, as though the dim rectangle of light could hold back the night. But already the forest pressed against the glass, shadows long and skeletal, claws ready to slip between the cracks. Her skin prickled. Something inside her chest thudded, not her heart, not yet, but something older, something buried in her bloodline. A sound rose in her throat, low and guttural, like a growl she had no right to make. She staggered to the front door, her hand shook on the knob, though she hadn't decided whether she wanted to leave or lock it. Either choice felt like an invitation. The forest didn't wait. A howl cracked through the pines, so close it rattled the window panes. It wasn't wolf, it wasn't man, it was the in-between. Marla's blood turned to fire, her body locked, frozen between fight and flight. Somewhere in the whispering chaos, she understood there was no leaving. There was no running. She was already part of the pact. The widow had marked her. The first howl has marked you. Subscribe now or face the night alone. The house did what old houses do when you're finally quiet. It remembered you. The board settled in a chain of pops like knuckles cracking. The rafters breathed, the dust lifted, as if the place were drawing a long, sullen inhale after years of holding it. Marla stood in the foyer listening for that howl again. But the grove had gone still, not silent. Never silent here, just waiting, the way a jury waits after the verdict has been read. She followed the smell of pine and damp paper to the back hall. The door there had been painted over 3 times in her childhood. White, then eggshell, then a yellow. Her mother swore was mourning wheat. Though it always looked sick, someone had cut the paint with a blade and pried it once. Recently, the edges lifted like scabs. Inside, the study, a cheap desk crouched beneath a window stair. Shelves sagged with parish records, county ledgers, a stack of hymnals warped by humidity on the floor. A cedar chest with a split running its length like a healed wound. Marla knelt, set her palms upon it, and felt the cold push up through the wood. There was a small brass latch with a key still in it. As if someone had meant to lock a thing and changed their mind at the last second. She turned the key. The chest clicked open with the soft resignation of a grave unsealing. Journals. Notebooks bound in leather gone grey at the edges. Names written in a neat hand across the first pages. Ink browned with time. Veil, veil, veil. Each generation spoke like a new testimony. And every first entry started in the same strange way. No deer to soften the blow, no small talk about weather or harvest. Just a date, a bloodline, a statement of standing. April 12th, 1888, I, Dinah Vale, entered the keeping of the widow's pact. Marla eased onto the floor with her back against the chest and read by phone light, turning pages with the careful fingertips of someone touching a wound. The words had the fever of confession. They spoke of the grove as a bride's veil of branches, of a figure in the trees, all hair and shadow, of offerings left in bowls of carved pine, always taken by morning, of a hunger that came in winter when game ran thin and men went missing, and the village said wolves, though everyone knew wolves leave footprints and the widow never did. There were sketches, charcoal studies of claw patterns on bark that didn't quite match any known hand, spirals of symbols cut into wood, a circle of stones like vertebrae around a clearing. Dinah had copied the glyphs as if precision could save her. Marla traced one. The lines were simple, almost childish, and yet her skin reacted as if a cool tongue had touched it. The whispering at the edges of her hearing lifted. like a congregation recognizing the opening line of a hymn. She paged forward. There were births and winters and 2 wars and a photo pasted crooked, a black and white of a woman at the grove's edge with her arms wrapped around a bundle. No baby face showed, just cloth under it. Written in a tight, ashamed script, "For the widow." Marla swallowed hard. The room had the airless ache of a confession booth. She kept reading because stopping would mean she agreed. An agreement is the first nail in any coffin. October 3rd, 1937. They call the other thing Dogman now. It walks on bent legs, eats what the widow won't, and drags the deer to the creek to spoil the water. The men want to hunt. The widow will not have it. She marks the dogs first, then us. The pact holds Dogman. The word sat like a stone in her mouth. A line drawing followed. Tall, hocked legs, a jackal lean, rib-proud and wrong. A man had once taken this drawing into town and not come back. Dinah noted, the widow does not like her rivals catalogued. Another journal, September 9th, 1964. A different hand, needle-thin, near desperate. When the moon is high enough to set the pines on fire, and the wind moves like teeth through the needles. You can speak the widow's name and she will answer. She is not a werewolf, though she wears us when her hunger overcomes her. She is older. She is the thing that teaches wolves to stand. Marla rubbed the heels of her eyes. The night pressed closer, curious. In the hall beyond the study, something shifted, the soft drag of a bare foot on wood. She held still. The movement stopped when she did. It wanted her attention on the page. Whatever had marked the walls earlier could wait its turn. The pines could wait forever. She found her mother's hand in the final book. Familiar loops. Firm pressure, no apology. June 24th, 2000. Marla asked about the voices today. I told her not to listen, I lied. You can't not listen. The pack doesn't ask. It inherits. We don't choose the widow, we are chosen. If you read this little veil, know that silence is a prayer she never answers. You will have to answer for us both. The desk shook, just once. A thud that traveled up Marla's arms through the journals. She cut her eyes to the window. The pain was fogged from her breath and faintly from another's. Something had pressed its face to the glass and left the ghost of a muzzle. The mark faded quickly, as if laughing at her need to confirm it. The grove hummed. The pines tapped the siding like fingernails on a coffin lid. She closed the book and laid both hands over it. For a moment she pictured herself 40 years from now, writing into a fresh leather spine, telling some future daughter to ignore the choir and pray louder. The thought disgusted her the way fear often disguises itself as rage. Enough legacy, enough inheritance. She wanted a new language that didn't taste like sap and ash. But the grove has 2 tongues. One for those who deny, one for those who admit. Only one lets you live long enough to run. All right, she said to the empty house, to the not empty grove. You want confession? Here's mine. She wasn't talking to the journals anymore. She was talking to whatever poured the glass and whistled through the boards and waited at the edge of every choice she'd ever made. The widow rewards truth the way a famine rewards salt. I hear you. The whispers brightened. A choir growing teeth. Have you heard pine voices like these before? Confess below, and bind yourself to the tale. The study could not hold her. With each convulsion, her frame grew too large for its walls, too wild for its corners. The widow pulled her through the plaster like a puppet yanked from its strings, and Marla crashed into the hallway. Claws carving trails along the floorboards. Her scream was gone now, replaced by a ragged breathing that carried edges like knives. The dogman's answering growl shook the house. Low at first, then climbing until every glass pane rattled in its frame. It didn't sound like one throat, but 10. The sound of a pack in a single body. Marla staggered toward the front door. Her instincts tore in 2 directions. One urged her to bolt into the forest, the other to crouch and wait for the intruder. She was the hunted and the hunter all at once. Every nerve a battlefield. The pines parted outside. The dogman stepped into the clearing. He was leaner than she expected, yet monstrous in the way famine is monstrous. Nothing wasted. Everything sharp. Bones pressed like weapons through fur stretched too thin. His head twitched as if sniffing, eyes reflecting the moon's cold light in slits of yellow fire. In his fist, the deer leg dangled like a toy he had forgotten. The widow surged through Marla. Her claws flexed, her teeth bared. Her stance crouched. She wanted to resist, to hide, but her body demanded confrontation. The dogman raised his muzzle and inhaled. Then he dropped the deer leg and let out a sound so guttural it made the marrow in her bones quake. A challenge, an invitation. She tore through the door. Splinters flew, hinges screeched, and the night swallowed her. The pine needles hissed under her claws as she bolted forward, muscles firing like pistons she had never owned before. Her body moved faster than thought, bounding, weaving, leaping across roots that once tripped her as a child. Behind her, the dogman gave chase. It wasn't the pounding of paws she heard. It was silence broken only when it wanted to break, a crack of a branch to her left. Then gone, a sudden shadow at her flank, then gone. It hunted like smoke, a blur in the corner of her eye, waiting for her to falter. The widow whispered through her muscles, "Don't falter." She flung herself over a fallen log and landed hard enough to split bark. For a moment she gained distance, but the dogman circled, reappearing ahead of her, body bent at impossible angles. His grin glistened in the dark, pinned. The grove swayed as though amused, as though the trees leaned closer to watch the game. Every claw mark on their trunks seemed to glow faintly with her bloodline's sigils. Marla realized the grove itself wasn't a witness, it was an arena. The dogman lunged, she rolled, claws meeting claws in a shower of sparks where their nails scraped stone. Pain shot through her forearm as his teeth grazed close. She roared, not her voice but the widow's, and the sound shook the branches above. The dogman faltered just enough. She ran again, deeper into the pines, but the whispers rose to a fever pitch. There is nowhere to run. Every direction became the same. Dark trunks dripping resin, silver shafts of moonlight that mocked her with their sameness. The forest folded in on itself like a labyrinth alive. She was prey, she was predator, she was lost. The dogman howled again, closer now. Answering the widow's challenge, the grove vibrated with the chorus. The sound of something ancient calling the hunt into balance. Her lungs burned, her claws dripped with sap and blood. She stumbled into a clearing she didn't recognize. Stone pillars rising like teeth around her. Glyphs lit up faintly in the soil. The widow had led her here. A ritual ground, a killing ground, and the dogman stepped from the shadows, circling, his eyes fixed on her throat. Where would you run if the claws found your door? Tell me, your answer may decide if you survive. The clearing was not new. It only looked that way because the forest had bent itself around it, as though every pine had leaned back respectfully to give it space. The circle of stones was ancient, older than her family's journals, older than the church that once stood at the county line, older than the settlers who carved roads through this land. Their surfaces were blackened, not with moss or fire, but with something that pulsed faintly under the moonlight. Glyphs crawled across the ground between the stones, etched into the soil itself. Some had been cut with blades. Others burned deep into roots that had grown sideways like veins. They glowed as she stepped closer, her claws leaving red trails that joined them. A new line written in the oldest script. The whispers rose. They weren't just the widow now. They were voices layered on voices, the echo of every veil who had stood here before her. The grove remembered. The pact was the archive. Marla sank to her knees, chest heaving, fur bristling against the cold air. She touched one of the stones with her palm, and visions slammed into her skull. Her ancestor Dinah Vale kneeling in the same place, blood streaming from her wrist into a bowl carved from pine. The dogman circling at the edge, snarling, only to be held back by glyph fire. A chorus of women, Vale daughters, singing through tears as they cut themselves open to keep the widow fed. Their faces changed, but their voices were the same. Each confession entered into the stone. Each sacrifice burned into the archive. Marla jerked her hand back, but the vision clung. She saw her mother here, too, kneeling, weeping, whispering prayers that dissolved into howls. She saw herself younger, tugged from the grove by her mother's trembling arms, told never to listen, never to look, and she saw tonight, inevitable as a blade falling, her return, her inheritance, her body breaking so the archive could live on. The glyphs shimmered brighter. The dogman paced outside the circle, lips peeled back, breath fogging in the cold. He couldn't step in, not without invitation. The pact had marked him an enemy. His claws raked the soil. Desperate hunger shone in his eyes. Not just for flesh, but for reclamation. He wanted the circle, he wanted the archive. The widow surged through Marla's chest, pressing her claws into the earth, dragging lines of blood across the glyphs. They accepted the offering greedily, glowing hotter. A voice inside her head thundered, "Write your name, add your line. The pact endures through ink." Through blood, Marla fought to hold her thoughts together, to stop herself from obeying. But her claws moved anyway, scratching letters into the soil. M-A-R-L-A. The grove pulsed at each stroke. She tried to lift her hand. It would not move. The pact wasn't asking, it was inscribing. The stones leaned inward, shadows lengthening like judges over a guilty child. The whispers swelled until her skull throbbed, and then silence. The glyphs went dark. The blood trail on the soil glistened, then sank like ink into parchment. The stones stilled. The archive had accepted her, but in the corner of her eye, she saw movement, the dogman pacing faster now. Furious that the grove had claimed her first, he threw his head back and howled. A sound like bone splintering inside an empty church. The forest echoed it back, and for the first time, Marla couldn't tell which voice was hers and which belonged to the beast. Her body shook with exhaustion, fur damp with sweat and blood. She wanted to collapse, to close her eyes, to wake in her childhood bed and find all of this just a nightmare told too late. But the pact would not let her sleep. The pact had inscribed her into eternity. She was the latest line in the archive, the widow's daughter, and the dogman would not forgive her for it. Curses echo, but only the archive endures. Subscribe now, and add your name before the howl returns. The stones closed their silence around her like a tomb. Marla's breath steamed in the cold, every inhale a jagged blade inside her ribs. Her name glowed faintly where her claws had carved it, the letters pulsing as though they were alive, as though the soil itself were remembering her bloodline now. But the dogman didn't care about archives. He cared about hunger. With a lunge that blurred more like a shadow than flesh, he hurled himself at the circle's edge. His claws raked sparks from the glyphs, teeth snapping so close she could smell the rot in them. He rebounded as if thrown back by unseen hands, snarling, foam flecking the air. The stones groaned under his assault. The pact resisted, but it wasn't unbreakable. The widow stirred inside her, pushing harder than ever before. Stand fight. Marla rose on trembling limbs, her spine cracked, elongated, vertebrae snapping like gunfire until her back bowed in a hunter's curve. Fur bristled along her shoulders. Her mouth stretched, lips peeled back over knives of bone. She felt the widow wear her more tightly now. Skin fitting the curse like a glove, the dogman howled, a hideous, scraping wail that split into two tones at once. The forest answered with a chorus. Shapes flickered between the trees. Were they more of him, or echoes, or just the pines mocking her with phantoms? She didn't know. She only knew the circle wouldn't hold forever. When it broke, only blood would decide who lived. The dogman struck again, harder, and one of the glyphs fizzled, its glow dimming like a candle in the rain. The forest hissed, a widow hissed, and before Marla could even move, her claws were already slashing outward. She crossed the glyph line. The pact did not stop her. It shoved her forward. The fight began in earnest. He met her with a leap, jaws unhinging wider than a wolf should, teeth clashing against her forearm as she struck. Pain lanced through her nerves. But it only stoked the widow's fire. She raked his chest, fur and skin shredding under her claws. He retaliated with a swipe that sent her sprawling into a stone, the impact ringing her skull with stars. The grove lit itself like a theater. Moonlight widened, glyphs flared, branches swayed as if clapping in grim applause. The pines were not witnesses, they were audience. They had seen this play before, they demanded it again. She lunged low. Tearing into his legs, he shrieked, an awful mix of man's panic and beast's rage. He toppled, but only for a heartbeat. His arm caught her across the face, claws scoring her muzzle. Blood blinded her left eye. She roared, spittle and scarlet spraying the stones. The whispers swelled, "Don't run, don't flee, finish." The dogman's grin gleamed red now, his breath steaming hot and rank. He circled her, limping but relentless. They both knew this wasn't a battle of survival. It was a ritual duel. One predator would claim the grove. The other would become the grove's meal. Every instinct screamed at her to end it now. Her claws flexed, ready. The widow pressed deeper into her chest, into her heart, into her soul. Strike now. Tear him apart. Let the blood soak the archive. Marla braced, every tendon singing, ready to give herself fully. But somewhere inside, behind the widow's commands, behind the howling of the pines, her own voice whispered, If I finish him, I finish myself. If I obey, I become nothing but skin the widow wears. Her claws trembled, the dogman charged again, and this time, her choice would decide not just the fight, but the legacy. The curse doesn't end here. Follow the howl. The next body falls on screen now. The clearing froze at the moment of choice. The stones hummed, the trees leaned closer. Even the moon seemed to hold its breath. Balanced on the knife's edge of clouds, the dogman barreled toward her, jaws wide enough to take her throat in one bite. His eyes burned with hunger, but beneath it, something else. Recognition. He knew her. Or perhaps he knew the widow inside her. They had met before, predator to predator. Across centuries of blood, Marla's claws rose, trembling. The widow screamed through her bones, "End him, seal the pact." But her mother's voice slipped between those whispers. "If you read this, little Vale, no silence is a prayer she never answers. You will have to answer for us both." This was her answer. Instead of striking, she dropped her claws. The dogman hit her like a landslide, teeth tearing into her shoulder, claws ripping down her chest. Pain detonated in every nerve. She staggered, blood spraying across the stones. But even as his jaws closed, she drove her other arm upward, not into his throat, not into his heart, but into the glyph glowing behind his spine. Her claws carved her own name out of it, Marla Vale. Then she slashed again, ripping letters from the archive, cutting her name back out of history. The grove howled in fury. The widow shrieked, her scream splitting the air like glass breaking across the sky. The glyphs sputtered, the circle dimmed, the stones cracked as if lightning had struck them from inside. The pact broke. The dogman flung himself back, disoriented, staggering into the shadows. He didn't vanish. He retreated, snarling, limping, his shape swallowed by the forest. He hadn't been defeated. He'd been denied his ritual. And Marla fell to her knees in the broken circle, blood soaking her fur, chest heaving. She expected to feel hollow, to feel the widow crawl tighter into her skin. But instead, silence. The whispers were gone. Not forever. She knew curses don't end that easily. But for the first time in generations, the grove had been forced to shut its mouth. Above, the moon slid free of clouds, lighting the shattered stones. Her reflection stared back from a pool of blood at her knees. Half human, half wolf. Eyes neither her mother's nor the widow's but her own. She wasn't free, but she wasn't theirs anymore either. The forest shifted. In the distance, the dogman howled again, long and ragged, promising their paths would cross once more. But tonight she had survived. And survival sometimes is rebellion enough. She staggered out of the clearing, claws dripping, breath steaming in the cold. Each step left a red print that glowed faintly before fading. No archive claimed her now. She carried her own curse, one she had chosen at the edge of the pines. She stopped, turned back, and let out a howl that was not widow, not dogman, not Vale, just Marla. The forest answered, but this time she didn't bow to it. She walked into the night, marked but unbound. The pack grows stronger with every whisper. Join the pack, subscribe and spread the curse before it finds you, and for those who hunger for more, step deeper into the shadows with our ultimate werewolf horror playlist, linked in the description below. In the world of horror, the scariest things happen when you least expect them, and trust me, you don't want to be left in the dark. Welcome to the darkness.